Hello and welcome. My name is Gavin Finley, and I'm here tonight with some very interesting gentlemen who have had a wonderful foundation in the Amish church, and they're here tonight to share a little bit of their experience as to what they've been through in their previous history as an Amish people, and also where God is leading them as they move on now. As we come toward the close of the age, the thesis that I have sought to bring out in all of what they share is that God has a wonderful and a glorious destiny for the memory and also the experience and the leading of the Amish people as we come into the latter days, because they certainly were the movers and shakers as they faced huge hurdles back in the 1500s. And they have not gone away, and they are still on the move. And so that's the general consensus that we have tonight as we've talked together. And so I'm going to start tonight by introducing Moses over on my extreme left, and he's going to introduce the rest of the young men here, and I'll let them carry on their story from this point on.
Okay, so I'm Moses Gingrich. This is my brother Elam, and this is my brother Eli. We grew up in an Amish community, very conservative Amish community, and certainly are thankful that we had the privilege to grow up that way and experience that. It has been a tremendous blessing, and we greatly honor that and are excited about what God is doing amongst our people, the Anabaptist people, and what He's done in the past. We're just excited to be here and talk about that.
But Moses, would you like to perhaps Eli here and Elam tell a little bit about what the Amish actually did back in the 1500s? What was their impact? We've heard a lot about it within the family of the Mennonites, the Amish, the Hutterites, and so forth. To a large degree, that history has been expunged from the history books. So, can you give us a brief little thumbnail sketch of what happened back in those days?
Sure. Do you want to expound on that?
Yeah. Of course, back in the 1500s, the people were really looking for something, and it was all state church control and all of that. So they were really seeking, and they started getting a hold of some Bibles and really finding out about God. And there was just this huge revival that just shook many countries in Europe and across that in Switzerland. The big thing started in Switzerland, and it just gained momentum. And the persecution come, and it seemed every time they would martyr one that 10 more would spring up, and it was unstoppable. And this went on for several hundred years, up into the 1700s, early mid-1700s, before persecution finally stopped. So God used them in a mighty way to shape and form His bride, and He taught them so many principles and foundations of His kingdom and of preparing them for an end-time move. So the Anabaptist people were getting very weary, and so were the governments. So they finally got to the place where the governments offered them, and there's actual literal written documents where they offered the Anabaptist people, if they would just become silent and no longer share about their faith, that they would give them financial security, and they would give them social acceptance and a country that they could call their own, and where they wouldn't be shunned and they could actually become a part of society. So there's actual agreements that were wrote up, and of course that is when they fell into a compromise. A lot of religion started coming in. The persecution stopped, and the move was literally over at that point. But still, that religion still is today, but they still do carry those foundational things that God taught them all the way back in the 1500s. And we believe that God allowed religion to come in to hold those foundational principles for an appointed time, for when the end times it really is needed. He will raise that up again, and there will be a people that understand community and will be able to work together and accomplish what God has called them to do.
So the major point was that out of the 1500s came Gutenberg, 1400s actually, Gutenberg's printing press. It happened in Germany, Switzerland,
Right.
and that was where the revival started and the
When the
Reformation
literature started coming
yes.
out.
And with that came the wonderful message of personal faith.
Yes.
And so the Anabaptists, at least to my understanding, correct me Eli if I'm wrong, they were persecuted by both Roman Catholic and Reformers.
Yes.
Even by Ulrich Zwingli in Switzerland,
Yes.
in the canton of Zurich. And so at that time there were the Reformation Wars going on. So carry along, just give us a little bit of more of a picture of what was going on there that caused the Amish and the Anabaptists to say, look, we don't want to do war anymore. The Catholic army in the valley this year, the Protestant army in the valley next year. Can you give us a little story of what was going on there?
Yeah, I'm not real familiar with a lot of the in-depth history back there, but I think largely when Jesus really got a hold of these people and they really got a hold of the love of God, they saw, that the love does not do that type of thing. And when we read all through that whole era of the persecution and all of that, people were drowned, people were burned at the stake, people were crucified. Largely they laid their life down for their enemies. And there's a very famous picture that a lot of people know of and that we have of the guy that was being chased by one of the enemies after him to catch him. And they crossed this little creek with ice over it. And the Anabaptist person made it across, but the guy that was chasing him did not, broke through. So the Anabaptist person stops and goes back and pulls him out to save his life. And then they caught him, and of course he got killed in that. So that was the whole concept that they felt inside. They had such a compassion and such a love that life didn't matter. Love was so much more important to not get involved in any of those things.
Yes.
And, just give your life just to be with Jesus and, live like Jesus did.
So the issues of, at that point, the issues of me and mine and survival were eclipsed by us and them and the kingdom of God.
They seen a greater picture. They seen another realm, a kingdom,
Yes.
with a king that they totally lived for, and their life had no meaning left to them. They only lived for Jesus.
Yes. I guess they've been brutalized as well through the Reformation Wars and the back and forth and the billeting of soldiers and the taking off of their women and the grabbing of their young men for armies, Catholics 1 year, Protestants the next year. They were sick of war after 30, 40,
Yes.
50 years of that. So you can understand where they said, look, we're not going to do it anymore.
Right.
And so they carried that with them as they went out into Holland and on into the English-speaking world and on into the New World, presumably. And that's where you pick up the story about how they were so keen to live a peaceful life that they just didn't want to have to be involved in the politics of warring and so forth.
So what's really interesting about that is that even today, the Anabaptist people still, most of them don't even realize that covenant was made, but they still live by that. The first thing that happens when somebody starts speaking about the gospel or the truth and starts, really speaking out the truth, is the first thing that happens is it goes back to that covenant, and he loses the very things that they had signed to be silent. You know, the first thing that happens is they lose their financial security. They're no longer socially accepted among their own people, and you know, they a lot of times they lose land, houses, things like that, which we experienced that very dramatically.
We're going to be talking about that in our next segment here, and there's the basic foundation as to where the Amish came from, and the legacy that is being continued to this very day in the principles of holiness, separation. The word holy means to be set apart. So these are the very issues that we're facing today.
Yes.
So we'll continue on this discussion in the next video, and I hope you've enjoyed it so far.